This is the input testing for my technical solution, starting with adding a teacher to the database. As you can see, the teacher with the ID JMI is not in the database. So when you go to the menu and try and input them in with extreme data, it shouldn't work. This is over 40 characters, so is regex checked and won't work. The same with last name, and the ID code has to be 3 characters as well. This has to be hours, so won't work with letters. And the same with the room preference, won't work with letters. You can't submit if one of these has not met the regex in the HTML file. So this then moves on to the next one when you shorten it down below 40, and so on. It still won't submit. When you try it with erroneous data, such as numbers in words, it still doesn't work, and it won't let you submit it. With correct data, it should be added. This is all correct data, so when submit is clicked, it is added into the database, as you can now see. I'm now going to test adding a department, starting with the extreme data. Which is not accepted, and then the name, which if over 40 characters will not be accepted. And won't go through. Trying with more data that shouldn't get through is going over the character limit. Not accepted, and adding things into the name that aren't allowed. Won't be submitted. Correct data should though. This is typical data, so should be added, and it is. Now onto a subject. This, for the extreme, if you start inputting things that aren't words, again won't be accepted. These are click buttons, so you can only have one, and one will never be unselected, so that's not an issue. Again, characters that aren't allowed. And this, if it goes over 40 characters, is not allowed. Or words where there should be numbers and subject codes over the character limit, and subject names as well, will not be submitted. Trying with typical data though, it should. Typical data will be submitted. If an incorrect department code was to be inputted, it would not work, even with the rest of the information being correct. For example, this is not a proper department, so when submit is clicked, you're presented with a reason as to why it couldn't be added into the database. When a part-time teacher is added, you need to set the hours, such as the one previously. So for extreme data, such as over the character limit, and with characters not allowed, does not match the request. A full-time teacher, who obviously already has them set, would not work either, as you're told they're not in the database of part-time teachers. However, with the correct data, it should work. and when you click on them and then submit it, they're added into the table. The next one is setting a class, which is here. So with extreme data of a subblock rather than a block doesn't match the request, a subject that isn't fitting with the characters isn't accepted, and the same with the class code, not accepted. With erroneous data, just normal characters over it, still isn't accepted. And the same with the block. Even with the subject, if it's not a proper subject, it will not go through, as it's not for subjects. And then if it was an incorrect subject code, you're told that. This is typical data and does go through and is submitted to the database. Setting a room is very simple, as is also regex checked, so anything over 3 digits or with letters or symbols is not accepted. These are also click buttons, so you can't ever not have that correct. So this is typical data and will be accepted, and it is. As well as adding data, you can also update it in the same place where you add it. It's normally below where you set it. So the example of updating a class with extreme data, such as numbers in the class code, doesn't work. And the same with this, if it goes over, it doesn't work. This data fits all of the character limits, however it isn't correct, so when submit's clicked, it gives you the reasons that the class isn't in the database, so it can't be added, and that the ID code was incorrect for the class. With typical data, it will work and goes through. With updating a teacher, the same thing's true, and extreme data gets caught by the regex and doesn't go through. Erroneous data that fits the character limits but is incorrect is caught, as it's not in the database, so can't be set or updated, and you are informed of that. Typical data works and goes through and is changed in the database. It's now connected to a database full of the test data that should work. So when you click create the timetable, it says it's been successfully created. Now to test the outputs of the timetables, you go to view a timetable. We'll start with a teacher. For extreme data that should not get past the regex, it's stopped. With erroneous data, it's told the teacher isn't valid. And with correct data, this is for a part-time teacher. It produces a timetable where they're teaching on the blocks that they can teach for their hours. And for a full-time teacher, also their classes with an appropriate number of sub-blocks off, as they are not contracted to teach all of them. Now the inputs for a room timetable, this won't work as it's letters, not numbers. And now this for the erroneous one is not a real room, so the room you entered was not valid. And for an actual room, this is the timetable with the class code and lesson code for the lesson taking place and the teacher that's teaching in it. Now for the inputs to get a class timetable with the extreme one. Doesn't match the regex. And the erroneous for a class that doesn't exist. The class was not valid, and now an actual class, typical data that will work. And you're produced with the timetable where a teacher who can teach that subject is teaching it in a room that's capable to hold that class. Now to show the program working, if we remove all of the lessons, they're now no longer there, then you can create a timetable and it's successfully timetabled. I'm going to change the database connection to a database full of data that will not work, test timetable solution, and then try it with that. I've now changed all of the connections to be the other database, so when you go back to the program, which is now connected to it, and you go to create a timetable, it doesn't work.